efficiency, turnkey solutions and financing, and data collection and analytics. And just to wrap your mind around things, I'm going to spend a lot of time today on the right two parts of the slide, the energy efficiency and the data collection and analytics. And if people want to talk more about the left two parts of the slide, we can do it at the end, or you can grab me afterwards. So I'll start with distributed energy more to get it out of the way. When I look at the energy space, I see this massive change. For probably a century, the only reason to do on-site behind-the-meter generation was for resiliency and reliability. And now, because more than half of an electricity bill typically is getting the energy from a central generation plant to a customer site where it's consumed, that often accounts for more than half the bill. And so we're in this dynamic where considering on-site generation can not only add resiliency, it can lower the bill. And that could be gas-fired generation, that could be solar, a whole bunch of different things. And what I think is interesting about the way we're looking at this is it's a holistic approach to energy management, and that includes resiliency and cost management. Regardless of what customers are doing, and I think everybody in this room would probably agree, regardless of what you're doing with distributed energy efficiency solutions that have payback periods of 2, 3, 4 years that are easy to do, they make a ton of sense, right? And then there's a whole bunch of different ways to do them. Certainly HVAC is extremely compelling. There's a lot of opportunities in HVAC, and we're really excited about HVAC. The other area that I think we haven't talked about sort of in the previous speakers, but where we see a huge amount of opportunity is in the LED upgrade cycle. And the Northeast is a little bit further ahead in that, Northeast in California. But even in the Northeast, there's lots of applications where LEDs make sense today, and they haven't been deployed. And so I think there's a bunch of really good reasons why there are these energy efficiency projects that have these fast payback periods available. And the two reasons are it's hard to identify where there's a project that really makes sense. I think we all see these solutions, they all have great promise, but it's hard to know what you're going to get in advance. And the second one is customers who are closest to the situation, who understand the engineering, often have the least access to budget. And so what we do is we try to reduce those risks through turnkey solutions. So we'll come in and do a site audit and specify solutions and do the installation and then do the M&V afterwards. And also really importantly with financing. So we'll provide essentially zero money down energy efficiency programs where you may have heard GE sold the GE Capital division. And that's true, we don't do investing as a business, but what we kept is industrial finance. And industrial finance is financing for our customers for products and services that we're delivering. And so what's interesting about Current is it's not necessarily equipment that GE manufactured and produced, but it's a solution set. And so as we're doing these energy efficiency upgrades, what we've seen, especially in lighting, is there's a couple different trends emerging. So one is obviously that LEDs are cheaper, the color quality is good, the lifetime is longer, you save energy, you reduce maintenance, and LEDs make sense. But at the same time, we're seeing this revolution in the IoT space. And one of the themes that I saw from all the speakers this morning is you've got data somewhere at the site, and you have to have a reliable way to collect it and get it up to the cloud. And I think there's lots of different solutions to that. One of the ways that we've approached it is throughout our built environment, lighting is pretty ubiquitous, right? Whether it's indoors or outdoors, parking lots. And so if you're going to go in and upgrade your light fixtures, you've got something that's stationary, that's anchored in place, that's got electricity connected to it. And fixtures they're not terribly expensive, but they're not super cheap. And you've got the labor of installing them. If you bundle the communications network into the light fixture and the sensor into the light fixture, you create this platform through your environment. And so that's really the essence of what Current is figuring out how to use that communications network and the analytics that we can build on top of it. And so specifically, what do we think about in terms of controls? Well, we'll integrate with pretty much anyone's controls, right? So Brad talked about proprietary, not proprietary. We're very much we want to ensure that we have security, but beyond that, we're open standards. And the controls that we use tend to be wireless, open standards, intuitive user interfaces, and really importantly, part of what we're building is what we think of as the industrial app store, right? So when you pull out your iPhone, and there's actually only a few apps that Apple made. They're ones that are important, right? So mail, calendar, but the vast majority of the things that are sitting on your phone are ones that partners made. And so what we're doing at GE is creating this infrastructure, this platform, with the security built in, with the analytics and normalization built in, but opening up the ability for partners to develop apps on the platform. And so sketching out how that applies before I transition a little bit more into the specific control solution. A big part of what GE is building on this platform is what we call the digital model of one. So we're all familiar with the CAD model, right? The CAD is as it was designed. And so let's take an example from the aviation business. You got two jet engines, they come off the assembly line, and they were at the exact same design. Before they'd even been attached to an airplane, they're different, right? That's just life. But once they're in service and they're on the plane, they're really different, right? They float in different environments. One's got frequent takeoffs and landings. One's in a very dusty, sandy environment. And so as we think about this digital model of one, what we're moving away from is a time-based maintenance, we do this every 3 months or every 6 months, to a condition-based maintenance where we can save money, we reduce downtime, and we prevent unanticipated failure. And the last piece in this section, when we think about this, and a lot of what comes to mind, we've got this network, we've got these sensors, they're in lights, and that enables us to do a bunch of things around energy management savings, right? So we can, and I'll go into more detail, but we can have occupancy sensors, we can connect to HVAC systems. But really interestingly, and this is what I'll touch on the end, I just want to plant the seed so you can kind of have it there in the back of your mind while we're going through the rest of the conversation. If you've got this IoT sensor network, you can start to do all sorts of business optimization things that are not related to energy. So in a retail store, it might be using a very fast light flicker that's connected to a cell phone camera or to Bluetooth to help people navigate inside a store to find the things that they're looking for, right? It might be in an office space where people have booked a conference room and the conference room is listed as occupied, but no one's actually in it, right? Your occupancy sensor can connect to the network and tell you that. So before I dive into the next section, let me stop for a second to pause. Any questions so far? Yeah?
Would an example of that kind of business optimization be supermarkets and using sensors embedded in fixtures to track which aisles are getting the highest traffic?
Absolutely. Yeah, so one of the things that we're getting a lot of interest in from retailers is trying to get data for their physical bricks and mortar environment that is similar to the data that, let's say, they would get in a digital environment, so an e-commerce environment. Yeah.
Josh, I have a couple of questions about the financing that you're providing. First question is, are you providing financial options for only GE manufactured or offered technologies? Or are you providing financing for a package that might include other? So that's the first question.
So let me answer that first.
Yeah.
So we're definitely providing financing for packages that have a lot of non-GE equipment in them. So the clearest example is if we do a rooftop solar project, we don't make modules, we don't make racking equipment, we do make an inverter, we'll often use our inverter, but we'll provide financing and a warranty wrap around the entire project. We've got our internal engineers who will source third-party modules that they're willing to put the GE warranty around.
And the second question I have is, what are you finding for the market acceptance of projects that have financing associated with it? Is that something customers are embracing?
really depends on the customer. So a lot of customers, they get very excited about the financing because it's a very aggressive rate and they don't think they'll have the money. And then we actually get into the nuts and bolts of the project, and the financing has to get signed off on by the CFO or the VP of finance. And they look at it, and they look at the project, and they see this incredibly fast payback period. So why are we losing some of that payback with financing? We can do this with our own money. This is a good investment. This is a better investment than I would make in my business otherwise. And so we definitely see that. We definitely see customers who don't want to use their own capital at all, right, and are very excited to get the financing. And then the third kind of wrinkle that I'll open up is there's a change in lease accounting rules that goes into effect in a few years. And so a lot of lease treatment that has been off balance sheet goes on balance sheet. And so people are just looking at that, and we don't give accounting advice, but customers are looking at that and figuring out whether that's going to change their approach. So I said, when we look at the lighting, what we try to do is think about, okay, the lighting's all in place, right? Can we attach our sensors to it? And so back in April, we acquired a company called Daintree Networks, and we've kept their brand separate, and they continue to operate pretty much separately. And the reason for that is because DE makes light fixtures, and Daintree sells to lots of our competitors, right? And so Daintree is open, and we do wholly own them, but we're also very happy to have them sell to our competitors, and we hope they keep doing that. And so when we think about the way building management systems tend to work, and really as a result of the way they've been installed, and there's often a standalone system for lighting controls, and maybe a separate standalone system for refrigeration controls, and a third separate standalone system for refrigeration, right? Maybe another one for security. And what we've looked at is, well, how many of them can we connect together through one network? Whether the system's already in place and we're just going to stream the data in, or whether it needs to be ripped out because it's old or it's not functioning the way the customer wants. So can we put that together in using the light fixture as a framework? And that's really what the Daintree platform is. So it's a way to manage multiple applications, whether those are HVAC or lighting or plug load or industrial processes, through one central set of controllers. And so you've got the individual devices, again, they can be attached to lights or not. In the middle there, you've got what they call WAC, a wireless area controller, and it's based on a Zigbee mesh network. And each WAC can support up to 100 devices, and those devices are daisy chained, so you get, I think it's 900 feet of range. I think I have that right, and then you can get at the next device. And the application that sits on top of Daintree is called Control Scope. And Control Scope has different modules and different units that can be applied for different verticals, right? So it might be a solution that's right for a bank, it might be something that's more for a retail store or a large industrial plant. But it is a network of controllers that allows us to hook different things together and build over time. So maybe you start with just lighting, and then add in thermostats, and then add in other industrial processes. And so it's a hardware solution that spans across applications, is open, wireless, and scalable. When we thought about how we were going to go to market, and I think this is a question for everyone, what we tried to figure out is how can we make this really easy to provision. And so that's a big part of why we've chosen a wireless solution. It's also why we have this single box approach where you get all the components, the commissioning is very easy and it's scalable over time. Before I go into some examples of savings, any questions there? Okay. So lighting, as I said, is the backbone of energy efficiency savings from what we focus on. And the major areas are task tuning, overall scheduling, occupancy sensors, daylight harvesting, and demand response. And so I know there were some earlier conversations, is this compatible, are other solutions compatible with demand response? Yes, like this is definitely compatible. I think the thing that's most important is having one central control location that's a web-enabled platform so that you can have that individual customization and then you can bring everything back to its set point. And we have that same approach on thermostats. So what we found, and people have probably seen this, a lot of places that have, I don't remember what the term somebody used earlier, but you've got the individual controls on the thermostats, and it's basically like they end up all over the place. We have this centralized control that brings everything back to a single schedule, and that gives you alerts and warning and fault detection and diagnostics, and also optimizes the energy usage. And the last area that I'll focus on is within the industrial space, the ability to connect pretty much anything that you can put a sensor on. So machinery, compressors, fans, and anything that's got plug load.
So Josh, what are you picking up here? Like what are you measuring with your sensor with these particular examples?
Yep. So I'm going to give a little bit more detail on some of the examples, but let's talk about fans now, because that's a really easy one. So if you've got temperature sensors, right, either in the lights or separately because they're wireless in the space, you can use that to dynamically control fan speed. You can also use that for a demand response event. On the plug load, you can use it in the extreme case for window air conditioning units. You can use it for demand response events, again, for kind of anything. You can use it to monitor and create energy savings and awareness and reporting.
So you're actually going to turn off plug load for DR?
We could, yeah, and we have, yes.
Wow, okay.
And it depends on the area that people are operating in, the type of business. You're not going to shut off all the plug load, obviously. You're not going to shut off the circuit. And so to recap, it's one platform that pulls things together and gives a standard set of interfaces. We think this is helpful, and we've had a really good response from customers. And what we find is people tend to be focused on 4 different areas of problems. So higher utility bills, energy efficiency codes and requirements. Really interestingly, one that's come up a lot is customer comfort, whether it's a retail store or worker productivity in an office space. And so being able to do that temperature control, but still bring things back to a central schedule. And then demand for sustainability solutions. So having reduction in the carbon footprint, but also the reporting needs. And unsurprisingly, we've got, everyone has sort of a list of awards, but we're pretty proud of having been recognized in a bunch of different spaces. But by the way, before I came up here and started talking, how many people have heard of or used Daintree's networks? Right? Pretty small. So what I think is more important and speaks louder than the awards is actual implementations and case studies. So Daintree is installed in over 1,000 sites, over 120 million square feet of space that's under management across industrial, retail, banks, offices, schools, outdoor parking facilities. And so I'll give 2 different case studies. One, a logistic solution, where before we did any upgrades, they had high pressure sodium lights in a 300,000 square foot warehouse. And if you know about high pressure sodium lights, they've got about a 15-minute warm-up period. So you can't do any kind of occupancy controls or dimming or anything that requires a fast response. And so after we upgraded to LED fixtures, we could do occupancy controls and occupancy savings. And on lighting, the energy savings was 90%. Pretty amazing. In addition, with the HVAC controls and the thermostats, we got 30% savings on the HVAC system and an overall simple ROI of 3 years. So that's in a retrofit example. In a new construction example, they did a building for Pepsi. That's a very large distribution warehouse. And they didn't end up putting in LED, they put in fluorescent, but they did put in wireless network thermostats and lighting controls. The controls investment was relatively small compared to the overall lighting project, but adds significantly to the savings. And so I think if you look at the lighting alone, and then you add the controls, you get 65% additional savings from the controls. And so, Kathy, back to your question, what we also did then was you got that network of sensors, right? We integrated that with the fans. And so this is one where, because you've already got the whole network in place, the add-on benefit gives an incredibly fast payback. And so the add-on cost of the controls for the fans was $40,000, and the savings for the fan controls was $13,000 to $15,000 a month. So you get payback in like 3 months on that additional piece. And it really shows how piggybacking multiple applications onto one network and one set of hardware and controls gives you tremendous additional value. All right, was there a question? So to recap on the Daintree piece, then I'm going to go into more of our energy management solution. We can use this across lighting, HVAC, plug load, fans, different types of sensors, and it's expandable. You can pull in data from different systems. We call it open on the bottom, open on the top. So you can bring in your own data, and you can take the data out into your own secure system. So we acquired Daintree. Now we're kind of back to the current yellow, right? And what we're looking at is a solution that we've developed in-house, which we think of as one of our reference apps, so similar to in that App Store analogy, the calendar or email, giving people the tools to do energy management with built-in analytics. And we think of it as energy management 2.0. Instead of just providing data, it's about providing optimization. And so if we look at energy management today, similar to the way the building controls landscape is kind of fractured and there's different solutions, often you have a separate utility bill payment or bill reconciliation module, separate from your actual utility bill, separate from your energy monitoring, separate from the lighting controls, the HVAC controls. And so, obviously it creates just mental energy of managing all those different systems. But more importantly, there's insights that come if you can combine that data. And if you're not combining it, you lose those insights. And so the first thing that we do is pull the data into one system, into a clean, consistent, normalized set of reports. And we don't just pull in the data from the site. Part of the beauty of what GE's coming into in the industrial internet is being able to normalize the data and pull in from different sources that are not directly from the site. So in this context, some of the major ones would be weather. Weather is super important, so we can normalize. Utility tariff structures, overall market energy prices, and being able to combine all that in one framework with the energy data and connect it back to the bills. And so as we think about, yeah.
Can you back up 1 second? So under external inputs, you can pull data in off of tariffs?
Yeah, so we have a partner that provides a tariff library. And so we think that managing kilowatt hours and kilowatt peaks is really important, but connecting it back to the actual bill is even more important. right? So if you've got a portfolio of sites and you're trying to reduce your peak, but you're trying to prioritize where to do that, doing that when you've got high demand charges is much more important.
So you're taking into consideration that many times those tariffs can change very frequently?
So most of them are regulated. They can change, but they don't tend to change like without notice, right? So a tariff has to get filed with the utility commission. We need to understand the customer's billing structure. So often there's a separate regulated portion and then the energy portion, right? So understanding their specific structure, but we'll work with customers on that to make sure that we're creating a tailored system that accurately reflects their bill and their billing structure.
I guess my concern about that is, if you get that wrong, that can be a very big problem.
Yeah.
I mean, not suggesting that you will, don't take it that way, but anyway, okay.
No, I think it's a really good point, and I think it highlights we're trying to build a pretty big solution. We're not trying to do it alone, right? So the tariff piece, we're working very closely with a partner who's an expert in the tariff space. That doesn't mean they're going to be 100% right. My view is that we have to take responsibility for the quality of the data. We're putting a lot of work into that. But if we look at everything that's an unknown, or potentially could be an unknown, say, well, let's just essentially put a 0 in because we don't know what it can be, so we're not going to put that in our calculation. We're missing a lot of data. And it's probably unrealistic to get 100% accuracy in the tariff structure, but I think we can get pretty close. And especially, it's difficult at the extremes of some of the largest sites, but we think a lot of our sweet spot is in the mid-size commercial, where the tariffs tend to be more standard, and where they don't have a full DMS system in place. They don't tend to have a great handle on their energy management. They don't have dedicated energy managers on site. They've got multiple sites across a portfolio, and we can bring that standardization and reporting.
So I would see that it's actually very powerful. That's why, obviously it has some potential.
Yeah.
Nonsense.
So we start with that consistent set of reports, and one of the things that we have to do as we onboard a customer is get the data and make sure that historically what we're seeing in the bills and the usage tied together. Right? And so obviously the tariff can definitely change, but starting with the initial baseline and getting it aligned is really important. And we've got a pretty broad suite of algorithms and analytics in place that make that a much less manual process than otherwise it would be. And then what I'm going to walk through is some of the ways that we go from that basic reporting to all the way up the chain into optimization of systems. And one of the things that Brent talked a lot about, I think we're similar in this, is the overall fault detection and diagnostics. And so when we think about industrial equipment, whether it's rotating equipment or anything, it's got sort of a bunch of different signatures, right? So it's got vibrations, and it's got a decibel level. And if we pick that up and run analytics on it, then we can identify what equipment is likely to fail, what equipment needs service, what equipment has already failed, potentially. And I didn't mention it, but I'd add on energy usage. Right? So when we see a building with lots of rooftop units, what we often see is they might all have the same or similar spec, but they're certainly not all operating at the same efficiency level. And so in the back end, we've got a whole bunch of deep analytics and data science around taking in that data, matching it to a machine, and then optimizing the environment. So again, let me stop. Any questions? There's a lot here. Yeah.
On the analytics, has GE embraced any specific data normalization nomenclature like John Pesci did a presentation, talked about SkySpark. Ashray, mentioned facility information system standard behind the meter tags. So if I had a chiller plant and you were able to collect all this data, but you really didn't have the chiller plant expertise, I could package it up and ship it to some other vendor that may be better on chiller plants. And so is there a standard that you've embraced at GE for tagging the data?
That's a good question, and I don't know the answer, but if you want to circle up afterwards, I can try to find the person who would be better positioned to answer it. I think the core of the Predix platform is that it enables other vendors to come in and do those analytics in a secure environment. But I don't know specifically what we've already got developed. Yeah.
So in your data analytics machine learning, I assume you're implying that it's real time. So
Near real time, yeah.
okay. And is that also part of the GE solution, or is it to be assumed that everything you're showing is part GE, part other partners that do perhaps machine learning?
So if you wanted to get everything from GE, you could stay within that confine. And so in a sense, there's sort of two ways I think about that. One is, let's take the tariff library example. We've partnered with a company, we're taking responsibility for their data, and we've essentially white labeled their solution. Right? So from a customer's perspective, you look like you're buying that from GE. Somebody's doing it in the background, but it's kind of invisible. Then we've got other things that we're doing where there's explicitly a partner that's branded, that's in place, and so you can really go either way.
And specifically the machine learning technology, is that yours or a partner's?
Right now, it's all, I believe everything that we've deployed is ours, I believe. And then I just have to think through, because I know it's, some of it we've developed with partners, not all in-house.
Thank you.
So this is, again, a bit of a review, but we go from the level of basic analysis to overall insights, and the goal is really optimizing total cost of ownership. So figuring out whether it makes more sense to do a CapEx solution today, or whether there's an OpEx minimization solution that we can put in place that over time is the best solution, and really running the analysis on how to optimize that equipment and from a cost perspective. So I want to go into one specific case study. I think this is a really interesting one because it initially didn't involve us putting in any equipment or any sensors. It was what I'll call really analytics as a service. And it's almost the first step of data gathering. So it was a large multi-site big box customer with I think 30,000 rooftop units, I believe, across almost 2,000 sites. And what we did is we pulled the data for all the set points and all the operating conditions off their existing system. So they were already tracking it. And we ran that through our analytics and our monitoring. And without putting any equipment in, but just looking at the data that was already coming off the systems, we identified $23 million of annual savings across the portfolio. And the majority of that was from reducing fan runtimes. And so relatively simple, but exactly like Brent said, that, these things are up on the roof, no one's paying attention to them. It's really hard to monitor them, right? And people have, one of the things that we hear a lot is people, when they hear like you can get more data, that doesn't really excite them. People have more data than they know what to do with. But getting the answers of what's in the data is really valuable. And so we started, again, it comes back to pulling in the equipment and also the environmental data. So information about the building envelope, the utility bill information, the location, and matching that to the weather, and information about the specific units.
Hey Joshua?
Yeah.
How did you charge for all of this? This is a lot of work pulling all this together.
So this we did as a part of a initial contract to win the business, and so I think we had an agreement that probably covered a portion or all of our costs, but wasn't designed to make money. What we're really trying to do is win the business of continuous commissioning and the overall network. And so for this customer in particular, it's a multi-strategy sale when we're looking at doing a lighting upgrade and the energy management. And so we're not in the business of selling a one-off, here's a report solution.
I'm just looking at the HV asset inventory, the HPC asset inventory, just as an example. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, so in that, I think we took the inventory that they had already from their system. We did some sample verification. We did not check 30,000 units and make sure all of them were correct. We did a pretty small representative sample, and then let me just jump forward. So one of the things that we did is we looked at what's the rating that we would expect to see on that equipment. So it's a little hard to see, it's a bit of an eye chart on the right, but that orange line on the bottom is the typical, what we'd expect to see for a unit's energy rating versus its age. And the blue line below the dots are what we actually saw. And so a pretty significant dispersion, not across all the equipment, but a lot of equipment not operating with the parameters that we'd expect. So it's entirely possible that their inventory is largely wrong, right? They think they've got a certain set of units, and so part of this is really a sales process of looking at what we can do with analytics without a huge investment and what that could potentially be worth. And maybe it's $23 million of savings. Maybe when we actually get in, it'll be $19 million. Right? What we're pretty confident is it won't be $2 million. Right? And so it's more of a proof of concept. So I think there was another question. Yeah.
I'm working on a weekly basis with building analytics, and it's great. But it's a time-consuming effort from the site team, even if you have a third party. If you don't have good rules of data management, you bring the data back, 50% of the time it's erroneous data because the data isn't classified. You look at a VAV box and it says the VAV box reheat is off. Well, it doesn't have reheat, okay? So you gotta have good filtration. The other thing is you need a good business model. Because if you go out and find $23 million worth of savings, there's probably $150 million worth of expense. So what we're finding is even with the best engine in the world, you have to go into the client and say, I've got to have money put aside in the budget. More low cost, no cost. More repairs. And then energy projects. Let's say you go in and you want to change the software. We have to pay somebody to reprogram the software. Okay? So I think this is great stuff. I think the technology is here. I think the greatest piece of this is, as Kathy mentioned, how do you sell this? How do you package it? Because this is pretty expensive stuff to do. And again, you're in an adversarial relationship with your building automation company. You're in an adversarial relationship with your facility management company. So it's definitely a great business, and I think the data portion is great, and we're there. But I got to tell you, it's like fighting a 10-year war. You have little battles, but you haven't won the war, kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know whether to hug you or cry. Because you're totally right. And so a big part of the bet that we're making is that you get two areas that are relative no-brainers that help us do this third part. And so that the first one is the lighting upgrade, right? Where LED lighting, where it hasn't been replaced, where people are going to replace the fixture, you're having people come into the space, so you're not paying for an additional truck roll, you're doing the site audits, the payback is fast, right? And so I think we have to really prove out that we can sell this along with that. I think, please, I'm happy to hear everyone's opinion. I think the LED upgrade will happen. I can't say 100%, is it going to happen with all these other benefits? But what do people in the room think?
Well, to follow up on something that Jeff said, is that a lot of, in order to do a project, what we do, you pretty much have to get some buy-in from an existing service provider, most of the time. And what we do and the way that we do it on the surface, almost all the time, is a threat to that service provider. Because they either one, don't understand it, or they haven't really thought that deeply about it. So part of our challenge in terms of selling it is trying to overcome that barrier and turn someone who's resistant to what we're doing, because they see it as a threat, turn them into an ally and a champion. And I think most of the time, when there's at least a willingness to listen, we're pretty easily able to show this resistor that we're actually providing value for them. Where all this information, putting a lot of things, data into light, isn't a threat to them, it actually empowers them. And in our specific case, it actually helps them get closer to their customer, and it also allows them to lower their cost of service. So I think there's a bit of a light bulb moment at some point during that conversation. And not everyone has it, but many do. But there has to be a willingness to listen. And we are kind of, we're not completely over the fence yet in terms of people's appetite for this sort of thing. So that's my experience.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I think that there's two other things. So in this particular example, the savings really did not have a lot of costs associated with them. So often you're right, and I go back to what I said at the beginning. There's some energy efficiency projects that initially sound really good, and you dig in, and you have to spend a whole lot of money. And there's others where it's like the set points are off, right? And it really is pretty easy, and the control systems are there. You need a really good set of analytics because people have plenty of data. They don't have the ability to know what to do with it. But I think that both cases exist. The second one is when there's a compelling value proposition, but there's an investment that's required. That's where bringing the financing can be helpful. It doesn't. We talked about it earlier. It's not right for every company. It's not right for every situation, and we won't finance everybody. Right? So you need the right level of credit.
To circle back to your LED, I'm doing millions and millions of dollars of LED retrofits, okay? And I'm doing them in California through plug and play, and I'm trying to get around Title 24, okay? But I'll tell you what the biggest problem in the lighting is not the LED, it's the controls. It's a nightmare, okay? And I have an existing building automation system that I can't do real good lighting control with, and the client's not gonna put a second system in, okay? So, I've got to tell you, I've seen more lighting control systems that don't work than I've seen ones that do. So I see that. I mean, we're putting in thousands of plug-and-play lamps.
Yeah.
The only thing we're running into is high valve failures. So we're going to the hardwired. Okay. So the lamp technology is there.
Yeah.
The problem is the controls and dimming. Dimming doesn't work when you have so few watts per square foot in pendant lighting, and you're not needing 30-foot candles. So to put dimming in, there's no value in it, So I just some feedback on the controls. I think if you go into a client space that's overlit, has T12 or early T8 lamps, they don't have any controls at all. It works, but if you're shutting your lights off, it's just a hard sell.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So I'll dig a little bit deeper because I think this is to me a really interesting example because I think the challenge is to find a way to efficiently get the data, analyze it, and find the solutions that still are low-hanging fruit. And so here, what you can see in the upper right is these fan runtimes that are 70 or 80%, and for this particular store, that's like 100% of the occupied period of the store, right? So we have some indication that something's wrong, and this is one where you guys are much more expert than I am. But I think it really is a question of the set points and the equipment not running the way people who, if they'd been looking at it, probably would have run it. And so back to the quantification and prioritization, with that whole set of data, we'll go back and actually give, and again, it's a bit of an eye chart, but the expected savings per unit, right? So per rooftop unit of implementing the change. So we can build that up from the bottom up, and it's a combination of factors that go into it. But I think we all are facing somewhat of a challenge of, well, this data overload, and budgets are constrained. Where do we prioritize? So hopefully we can help, but it's not easy. In the interest of time, we're just about done. So and I think we talked about this a lot. And when Kathy asked, like, well, how do we charge for this? What we are from GE Lighting as a business, like, it's hard to get an older business. From our energy management software, it's hard to get a newer one. So we are, installing our first systems now. I just want to be really clear, right? So we're very happy to work with people who want to try it, who want to do pilots, and we're in the scheme of things, probably not very expensive because we're looking to prove that we can make this work. But I don't want to oversell and say, we've got lighting controls installed. And I think our lighting controls do work, but our energy management system, it's early, and I think we've got something really good. I think we've got a phenomenal team, but we got to prove it. Yeah.
I think to Jeff's point about the lighting controls, it's not that the controls don't work, it's that the people who operate the facilities don't have the bandwidth to operate them to what they're capable of doing. And that I've seen this countless times where you walk in and the lighting control system sits over in the corner and no one pays attention because the people who are accustomed to operating the building controls aren't electricians, they're HVAC people.
Right.
So, it involves a mindset change on behalf of the customer at a time when they have fewer resources. And so you have to be able to make that value proposition statement to them that this is going to help them use their resources better and improve it in some way.
So I completely agree. And I'm from the owner side, right? So completely agree. All of the lighting and lighting controls, that's what the focus is. We're resource strapped. We don't have enough money. We don't have CapEx. We don't have OpEx. We don't have people. We don't have resources. We don't have HVAC technicians anymore. It is all third party. So, what's coming of age now with the lighting is, lighting as a service. I need lumens. I don't need stuff. I don't need controls. I don't need ballasts. I don't need building. I need lighting. I need lumens. So the whole model, we're going to almost the Uber of everything. We're not going to own anything. We're going to lease it. We're going to rent it. I'm going to need lumens. I need chilled water, hot water, temperature. I don't need chillers, boilers. I don't need stuff. Especially on my books, I don't need that stuff anymore. So the data, it's great, but with a 15-second, that's all I can concentrate at a time, because of this thing. Right? That's all I can concentrate on. So great, we have all this data and so forth, but I can use it.
So Dave, do you think that whole as a service platform, including financing and everything, is palatable to the folks you're?
It's going to get there, but to the point, the very point, the analogy that you brought out, that as we migrate, and I work for a big company with a lot of money, and but we're always screaming we don't have any, so we try to introduce atypical financing schemes, as we talk about, and then the finance people do get involved and go, well, wait a minute. Why are we giving up all those savings?
Right.
We should be able to. So we go back and great, give me the money. No, don't have any money. We just keep spinning the wheels. But are we going to get there? Absolutely. And it is the Uber of the world and that type of an approach that I think is going to get us there. PPAs that didn't exist just years ago is what's really gotten the uptick. You go to Home Depot and you get accosted by the people now who are selling solar. the GE current people have been asking for solar, so, and for lighting and everything else. So, that's the way I think that the world is gonna go. We're not gonna own things, data is gonna be handled by somebody else, because we just don't have the resources and the time.
Well, and to sort of tie that point back in, so I come back from a building automation perspective. I would think as a building owner, if I'm gonna have a Siemens automation system and a Daintree lighting system and everything, I don't wanna have to figure out, Daintree has thermostat level stuff that doesn't control lab HVAC, integrating those two, I wanna have a single provider that I can call and say, okay, you have to, you own maintaining this for me and delivering lumens and proper ventilation rates. And so that creates the challenge for the providers to have those sort of integrated those partnerships and the integrated skill sets to be able to do that.
How are you doing, Joshua? Are you almost through your presentation?
Yeah.
I don't want to cut you off.
No, this comes back to the seed up in the beginning, and we actually talked about it pretty early, and so that's it.
Can I
So
throw
what-
one question at David? I'm sorry,
Go
just
right
to follow up on the subject here is that, to bring these other folks in to provide lumens for you and take care of your building, to do that most cost effectively, you're gonna have to let the providers remotely access your building, look at your temperatures, look at your set points. Do you see that as an obstacle, or do you think the IT people have that under control?
It's a challenge, and we see it every day, obviously on the news, somebody's getting waxed, somebody's getting hit, I can't tell you how many times a car has gotten hit, we've got to reissue. So it's a big issue, everything that we're talking about in terms of firewalls are a huge issue, but it's an obstacle that has to be overcome. If we are, again, going to kind of wipe our hands from an owner's standpoint,
Yeah,
and wipe our hands of it, well, we can't have the cake and eat it too.
right.
So that's something's gonna have to give, if you will. What that solution is, who knows, but it's definitely an issue, without a doubt.
So one of the things I'm taking away from this is certainly the technology is not getting any easier. It's getting a lot more complicated. I mean, I could barely understand what I was doing enough to put this speaker group together, never mind, I think you all did a fabulous job, and I want to thank you very, very much for participating, and I'll thank Jeff again, there he is, for donating the space. But I think that this is a very interesting point, and it's sort of the reason that Current's jumping in and saying, this is what we're hearing the customer say is exactly what Dave is saying, is they don't have the time or the expertise to figure this all out. So someone else figure it out and then sell me lumen, light, energy efficient light that's already got all of this other stuff in it, So it's going to be very interesting to see how this proceeds. I know you all have my email address, and if you don't have cards here, I would be very interested in hearing from everybody as to what they would like to see next year in the technical roundtable. What are the issues that you need me to do a deep dive on, pull in the expertise so that we can start having conversations that get us closer to the solutions we all need. So if you don't have my email address, grab one of these cards. Thank you very, very much for coming. I know everybody's going to be here for a few more minutes. If you have more questions, feel free to